Namaskar, Jai Shri Krishna. Illuminating text 47, text 48 and text 49 of chapter 13, Dhritarashtra quits home of first canto creation of Srimad Bhagavatam. Text 47. Ahastani sahasta nama padani chatushpadam falguni tatra mahatam jivo jivasya jivanam. Those who are devoid of hands are prey for those who have hands. Those devoid of legs are prey for the four-legged. The weak are the subsistence of the strong, and the general rule holds that one living being is food for another. A systematic law of subsistence in the struggle for existence is there by the supreme will, and there is no escape for anyone by any amount of planning. The living beings who have come to the material world against the will of the supreme being are under the control of a supreme power called Maya Shakti, the deputed agent of the Lord. And this Daivi Maya is meant to pinch the conditioned souls by threefold miseries, one of which is explained here in this verse. The weak are the subsistence of the strong. No one is strong enough to protect himself from the onslaught of a stronger, and by the will of the Lord, there are systematic categories of the weak, the stronger and the strongest. There is nothing to be lamented if a tiger eats a weaker animal, including a man, because that is the law of the Supreme Lord. But although the law states that a human being must subsist on another living being, there is the law of good sense also, for the human being is meant to obey the laws of the scriptures. This is impossible for other animals. The human being is meant for self-realization, and for that purpose he is not to eat anything which is not first offered to the Lord. The Lord accepts from his devotee all kinds of food preparations made of vegetables, fruits, leaves and grains. Fruits, vegetables, leaves and milk in different varieties can be offered to the Lord, and after the Lord accept the foodstuff, the devotee can partake of the prasad, by which all suffering in the struggle for existence will be gradually mitigated. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9.26. Even those who are accustomed to eat animals can offer foodstuff not to the Lord directly but to an agent of the Lord under certain conditions of religious rites. Injunctions of the scriptures are meant not to encourage the eaters of animals but to restrict them by regulative principles. A living being is the source of subsistence for other stronger living beings. No man should be very anxious for his subsistence in any circumstances, because there are living beings everywhere and no living being starves for want of food at any place. Maharaj Yudhishthira is advised by Narad not to worry about his uncles suffering for want of food, for they could live on vegetables available in the jungles as prasad of the Supreme Lord, and thus realize the path of salvation. Exploitation of the weaker living being by the stronger is the natural law of existence. There is always an attempt to devour the weak in different kingdoms of living beings. There is no possibility of checking this tendency by any artificial means under material conditions. It can be checked only by awakening the spiritual sense of the human being by practice of spiritual regulations. The spiritual regulative principles, however, do not allow the man to slaughter weaker animals on one side and teach others peaceful coexistence. If man does not allow the animals peaceful coexistence, how can he expect peaceful existence in human society? The blind leaders must therefore understand the Supreme Being and then try to implement the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God, or Ram Rajya, is impossible without the awakening of God consciousness in the mass mind of the people of the world. Text 48. Tadidam Bhagwan Rajan ne Atmatma Nam Swadrup Antaro Anantaro Bhati Pashyatam Maya Yorudha. Therefore, O King, you should look to the Supreme Lord only, who is one without a second and who manifests himself by different energies and is both within and without. The Supreme Lord Personality of Godhead is one without a second, but he manifests himself by different energies because he is by nature blissful. The living beings are also manifestations of his marginal energy, qualitatively one with the Lord, and there are innumerable living beings both within and without the external and internal energies of the Lord. Since the spiritual world is a manifestation of the Lord's internal energy, the living beings within that internal potency are qualitatively one with the Lord without contamination from that external potency. Although qualitatively one with the Lord, the living being, due to contamination of the material world, is pervertedly manifested, and therefore he experiences so-called happiness and distress in the material world. Such experiences are all ephemeral and do not affect the spirit soul. The perception of such ephemeral happiness and distress is due only to the forgetfulness of the qualities which are equal to the Lord's. There is, however, a regular current from the Lord himself, from within and without, by which he rectifies the fallen condition of the living being. From within, he corrects the desiring living beings as localized Paramatma, and from without, he corrects by his manifestations the spiritual master and the revealed scriptures. One should look unto the Lord, one should not be disturbed by the so-called manifestation of happiness or distress, but they should try to cooperate with the Lord in his outward activities for correcting the fallen souls. By his order only, one should become a spiritual master and cooperate with the Lord. One should not become a spiritual master for one's personal benefit, for some material gain, or as a revenue of business or occupation for earning livelihood. Bona fide spiritual masters who look unto the Supreme Lord to cooperate with him are actually qualitatively one with the Lord, and the forgetful ones are perverted reflections only. Yudhishthir Maharaj is advised by Narad therefore not to be disturbed by the affairs of so-called happiness and distress, but to look only to the Lord, to execute the mission for which the Lord has descended. That was his prime duty. Text 49. So ayam dya Maharaj Bhagwan Bhuta Bhavanah Kala Rupo Avtarno Asyam Bhavaya Surdvisham. That Supreme Personality of Godhead Lord Shri Krishna is the guise of all devouring time. Kala Roop has now descended on earth to eliminate the envious from the world. There are two classes of human beings, namely the envious and the obedient. Since the Supreme Lord is one and the father of all living beings, the envious living beings are also his sons, but they are known as the Asuras. But the living beings who are obedient to the Supreme Father are called Devtas or demigods, because they are not contaminated by the material conception of life. Not only are the Asuras envious of the Lord in even denying the existence of the Lord, but they are also envious of all other living beings. The predominance of Asuras in the world is occasionally rectified by the Lord when he eliminates them from the world and establishes a rule of Devatas like the Pandavas. His resignation as Kal in disguise is significant. He is not at all dangerous, but he is the transcendental form of eternity, knowledge and bliss. For the devotees, his factual form is disclosed, and for the non-devotees, he appears like Kala Roop, which is causal form. This causal form of the Lord is not at all pleasing to the Asuras, and therefore they think of the Lord as formless in order to feel secure that they will not be vanquished by the Lord. Hare Krishna.